Producers are always updating and creating new templates to make their next project even more streamlined. But what's it like living the producer life while also trying to create the software for the future of film budgeting? To answer that, we're joined today by producer Jens Jacob to talk about his producer journey as well as his work co-founding the new budgeting app Saturation.io. So without further ado, let's get started. Thank you for coming on to the producer podcast today, Jens.
Hey, my honor, Micah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we actually don't know each other at all. I I found out about you through the Saturation app that we're going to talk about here today on the show. But maybe to start, just kind of introduce yourself and a little bit of how you got started in the film industry.
Yeah, so I'm a producer in film and commercials. Been doing it for the last 12 years, primarily as a producer in the commercial and music video space,
Okay.
and have now transitioned into doing feature films. And uh, I started out probably like many filmmakers, like, was starting to do home videos, and then that turned into, oh, maybe I can do this as a career, and found my kind of place in that. But yeah, started out doing a lot of music videos, and then that transitioned more professionally, and I was able to work with a lot of different production companies as a freelancer, and really was able to sink my teeth into what it looked like and move to LA to, live the dream. And yeah, I got really lucky, and I kind of got under the wing of a predominant music video producer at the time. And
Okay.
I didn't even know I wanted to produce at the time. I just knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, or I think at the time I wanted to be a cinematographer. That's
Hmm.
why I originally moved to LA, because I loved cinematography. And then it kind of quickly transitioned once I started working under a more seasoned producer, and then it was like, oh, I think I could do that. And I found myself creative in logistics and creative in like the producing element of a project. So that kind of, yeah, transitioned into that, and started my own company in 2013, which is
Nice.
Cypher, and started doing commercials and music videos there. And in 2017, a lot of it flipped when I had met my now producing partner, Jason Paymer. We started, we wanted, I mean, ever since all of us entered into the industry, as much as we love commercials and music videos, everybody wants to get into features. That's kind of,
Hmm.
you, most people are probably using it as stepping stones. And that was the case for me. Um, and so, yeah, started working on our first feature together. That thankfully was a success and went into theaters, and kind of parlayed into multiple features now that we're working on, and I'm sure we'll get into, but also is the reason why I started making software as well.
That's cool. Kind of like two questions off of that. The first would be like what obviously you talked about how you really enjoy like the logistics and that, but like there's so many different producer positions. Like is there a certain type of producer you normally are finding yourself in on projects?
Yeah, I remember early on, the term producer was so vague,
Hmm.
and you just didn't fully know what a producer does. And I remember the first producer that I was able to, Jason Baum, he's an incredible producer. He had coffee with me. It was like I was just trying to like see if I could talk to a producer to see what they do, and see if that was like really a fit for me. And I remember one of the first things that he said when we were grabbing coffee was, because I just asked him like, what does a producer do? And he said, well, it's a lot like wedding planning. And it if you understand what a wedding planner is to a couple, or to that part of the process, very similar in the terms of, couple has a vision for what they want. to do, but may not know how to accomplish it and execute on it. Similarly, a film producer is doing that for a film. And I immediately understood what he was saying
Hmm.
just because 6 months prior to that, I had planned a wedding. So it was interesting that that was the analogy that he ended up using
Yeah.
because that is really what sold me. I was like, oh, I've done that. I can do this. But later on in life, I remember somebody defining it even more so of like what the different types of producers do. And this was a helpful framework to me to understand. This one gentleman, he said there's only three types of producers in the world. You can say you're good at all of them or two out of the three of them, but if you're a good producer, you're only really good at one of them, or
Okay.
like that you identify as one of these. The three types was most traditionally it's a line producer.
Hmm.
Line producer is the one that handles most of the logistics, the kind of boots on the ground type of producer. The second type of producer is a creative producer, which I think everybody identifies them as themselves as a creative producer.
Yeah.
But more maybe specifically, a creative producer is the person that originated the idea or is like the main person that's leading the charge of the creative IP
Hmm.
around something. The third type is a sales producer. You're essentially responsible for, call it whether it's fundraising to distribution. You're the person that's actively like trying to get this project off the ground and maybe in front of as many eyeballs as possible. The challenge is trying to identify the one. You could easily say that, oh yeah, I think it's two out of the three, or like,
Yes.
that I'm partially good at two out of the three, but to put a finer point in it is the hard part. So I think I've traditionally been a line producer. That's kind of
Okay.
what most of my career has been, and most recently in my company, it's been a sales producer. That's what my business partner and I have been mostly doing in an effort
Hmm.
to build the company and grow. So yeah, not to say that you couldn't, you know, put different hats on, but yeah, you really want to just kind of identify as one and be as strong as you can in that one track if possible.
Okay. Yeah. No, I really like the breakdown of that. I've never heard it described that way. Um,
Yeah,
but
me neither up until that point. And I think that was a great framing for my growth because there is a lot of ambiguity sometimes in that role. But I think that really helped, particularly when you're working with multiple producers or if you're like in a bigger project where there are multiple producers. Sometimes when it's a smaller enough project, you probably are wearing all the hats,
right,
so to speak. But for career moves or if you're like, doing something on a larger scale, I think that's a helpful framework.
for sure. So then I also wanted to ask, because you're not the first guest I've had on the show that has a producing partner. What made you decide like, okay, this is another producer that I want to actually like partner with on stuff?
That wasn't an easy decision. I don't think for either of us. I think both of us have had our fair share of like failed partnerships or failed, you know, or maybe just not most ideal like
Hmm.
partnerships. So at the time, the last thing I wanted was a partner. I was purely fine going solo and doing what I did because, there was more control and, it was easier to like get things done. I think at the time, and I don't want to speak for him, but I can, I think I can generally say we both saw something in each other that I think we knew we could grow further and quicker than if we just did it ourselves.
Hmm.
And I think that was kind of what we saw that on that first project,
Yeah.
which was called The Heart of Man. When we were partnered on that, we saw what we were capable of together.
Hmm.
There was talent, unique insight, relationships that he had that I didn't have, and hopefully vice versa. That it was different enough that together it felt complementary and it actually felt like, oh, like we could do something bigger. And that proved to be true. I mean, I think about that now. I probably still would be a commercial not that there's anything wrong with commercial producing, I think I would still be doing like mid-level commercials if we didn't align ourselves in the way that we did and really try to execute on the vision. I think there's something about accountability, something about a person that's there to like blow wind, into your sales and vice versa. In
Yeah.
many ways, it's like a marriage. For us, it was truly enhancing. Like we saw like the weaknesses and strengths that we both brought to something, and it's why we wanted to partner together. And we had a very similar vision for the types of films that we wanted to do. And he's become my best friend. He was just my best man at my wedding a couple months ago.
Nice.
Um, and so yeah, it's been an incredible partnership in that sense. And I don't I would strongly encourage it for where you can find it. Definitely
Hmm.
don't rush into something like that. We got really lucky because we were able to journey almost 2 years on a project together to see those types of elements come out in both of us.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it was healthy, and I think we both identified that we wanted to start a studio. We wanted a company. If you're
Hmm.
just doing like a call it a film or a series of films, you may not need to in a more official sense, but
Right.
we really did see ourselves as wanting to start kind of like a independent studio that we could do multiple projects at the same time, and I think that's what uh helped us make a decision like that.
Nice. Yeah. And no, it's cool you brought up Heart of Man there because I actually did have a few questions off of that film because
Oh,
I've
cool.
seen
You've
it.
seen it.
I've
Oh,
seen
wow.
it, really enjoyed it.
That's
Um
awesome.
and
Yeah, happy
stuff.
to share any insights.
Um to start, I'd just be curious to hear like what drew you to that project because it is a documentary in some ways, but it's very different in that it has a very clear like narrative story throughout the whole thing as well. And yeah,
Yeah.
like what drew you to taking on that project?
Yeah. At the time, I had a mutual friend for Jason and I, Tony Anderson, who was like a big part of that project coming off the ground. And he's traditionally a composer, but he was
Okay.
one of the producers on that project. We had lunch one day in LA and he was telling me about the project and it sounded so fascinating. I hadn't really heard anybody talk about this particular subject in that way, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of talking about like porn addiction and various things. And I was like, oh, this is like really interesting that you've tackled on a subject that way. And so at the time I was just like, hey, whatever you need help with. And I was just thinking more like resourcing if you need a relationship or a camera or anything like that. I'm happy
Yeah.
to help. I wasn't really thinking about getting involved with the project. And then the first conversation Jason and I had, it was a negotiation. And so that was kind of the funny part that was like the beginning of our relationship is that we were on opposite ends. Because at the time I had a rental house and I had like a couple things that was useful for the film project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but long story short, like it was this unique hybrid that they were trying to do, which was like this half narrative, half documentary. And the narrative wasn't necessarily like a recreation of the doc that you've probably seen in traditional docs. And I think that's what really drew me to the project to want to be more involved. And so it initially started out as, hey, I'll help resource the project. And uh but then it kind of slowly became like so I wasn't a part of the project from like day one like Jason
Mm-hmm.
was and Tony was. It was right around the time that they were starting to do the narrative that I kind of more formally joined the project
Okay.
and yeah, fell in love with the idea that like I can be more a part of it. And so then Jason and I started talking and he really wanted to see me come more formally as a producer because he thought, I could really help. At the time, we were doing a lot of narrative shorts, and I think that's what Cypher was more known for.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of felt like that. It was this narrative short that was in this like doc. So that's kind of how I was treating it. And then I became like really fully involved in post and securing additional interviews. And so we kind of became producing partners at that point when I started just I think for me, like when I get involved, I feel like it doesn't matter like how much money I'm making or like I really get involved. So like
Yeah.
I think they saw that and I just was like starting to show up in different like aspects of the production that I wasn't necessarily tasked with at the time. And it was a beautiful like I think synergy amongst like all the core team. The director was incredible. The producers that I got to work with, Jason, that's where our relationship really started. But yeah, so I was the latter kind of straggler to the to the project. But yeah, thankfully we were able to have a huge impact on
Hmm.
that project.
Yeah. No, that's cool to hear about that. And yeah, I've had a few of those projects too where it started out as like I'll just kind of help, but I'm not like
Yeah,
on it, and then it just keeps growing. And by
exactly.
the end, you did X, Y, and Z and all that in between.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how that works sometimes, but thankful that it did end up that way.
Yes. So I'd be curious because I know the part of it was shot in Hawaii. Were you involved during that portion of the project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually kind of right before the narrative, which was all shot in Hawaii, was kind of when I came on board.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, we got to shoot in the Big Island in Hawaii, in Kona, and it was unbelievable. Just what we were able to achieve there, the different types of terrain that they had there. Uh, we got really lucky because it was a production services company that really helped out on the
Okay.
ground there. So yeah, it was an incredible experience. They've got a great crew there, great people, great locations, and it was Hawaii.
Yeah.
It was just like it was the most beautiful experience.
Yeah. No, I'd be curious, because Hawaii is still on my bucket list of places to go film in.
Oh yeah.
Like, is there anything, you learned or like any wisdom you'd be like, okay, if you have something come up, like make sure you do this or look into this.
Not specifically for Hawaii, but with anything where you're not, call it like local to, it's got
Hmm.
its challenges in terms of, and I would suggest any kind of boots on the ground or somebody that understands or knows the area. Sometimes they come in the form of a fixer
Yep.
or a producer or whatever it might be. We try to, anytime we're doing something internationally or like just up an area that we're not fully familiar with, have somebody like that
Hmm.
locally on the ground that just knows the locals, knows the maybe the regulations, the process, whatever it might be. It's tremendously helped us, save a lot of time and energy to have
Yes.
somebody like that. Yeah.
I guess like with that project, I'd be curious just to hear like you as a producer, was there like a key thing you either learned or felt like you really grew in this area of producing?
That was a huge growing season and project because I had never really done a feature
Hmm.
up until that point. And even though it was a doc, because it was half doc, half narrative, you kind of were learning on both ends of that, I guess.
Okay.
And particularly what it means to do long form. I think there's an approach that you take when it's a short film or a commercial or a music video. And in many cases, it's like a couple weeks and then you're kind of moving on to the next thing. I think being a doc feature and having to think about it more holistically and something that might take a couple years to do, it was very challenging and very growing because I think
Hmm.
I naturally just I think have ADD when it comes to the types of projects that I'm able to. It's why I loved commercials. I was able to kind of like do, call it 12 to 20 of these, in a year and kind of just
Right.
move on to the next thing. So definitely growing and even from a creative standpoint of what it meant to tell a story um, holistically as a feature. You like what in many ways when you're doing a short, it could be sometimes like a scene. You're not doing a whole arc.
Hmm.
Um, in maybe some shorts are like are that way, but a lot of the shorts that we had done kind of felt more teasery or was
Okay.
So even from a storytelling standpoint, I think what it meant to do a documentary and fulfill that arc to be both entertaining and educational and creative and informative, like, it was a challenge. I mean, we went through, I think it was 86 cuts of that
Oh,
film.
wow.
It was, I mean, in many ways, the narrative can be a lot easier because the script is kind of like your Bible in a lot of sense, and
Hmm.
you're just cutting to what's there, and there's some creative leeway. Uh, when you're doing a doc, you're trying to discover the story as you go instead of
Right.
it's all there from the beginning. And so that was a challenge, yeah, to go through that many, cuts. The post process, I think, can easily balloon. And since then we've been trying to figure out how to be more efficient
Right.
in that. But sometimes it just is what it is. Like you'll find stuff or discover stuff along the way, or something new might pop up, and you really want that to be a part of the project. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a growing season, particularly when it comes to, and I urge everybody to. It's easier said than done, but like try to do it even if it's D level, like to be a part of a feature, because I think it is very different than call it a short, or if
Hmm.
most people, if call it like 75% of filmmakers are doing some version of like shorts or docs or um, commercials or music videos. I urge everybody to try, even if it's with a group of friends, to accomplish something like that. I think it's a growing process.
Yes. That's cool to hear. 80 86 though. I can't imagine that. Like I know how I've gotten when it's made it to like cut 11 or 12
Yeah,
of a project and I'm just like I'm done with it.
totally. Yeah. I mean, even that, like midway through, we had to like get another editor just because
Hmm.
like you could only like stare and look at it for so long, and we kind of needed somebody to have fresh eyes on the
Right.
project to be able to take it to the next level. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that project was a lot of new in terms of what it meant to like do a feature. uh I got to be a part of the first time I was a part of an original score and working with an orchestra and all of that. Like I had not had to do that prior on commercials and music videos. So there was just a lot of new in that. Like we learned
Hmm.
so much, and it was sometimes you don't learn certain things in the industry until you do it. Uh, and that's what this really felt like. You're never really growing if you're not achieving new heights, or like doing new projects that might test your comfortability a little bit, and
Right.
and no two projects are the same, right? You're probably always continuing to learn something on a new project.
Yes. So I guess I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Because I totally agree with like if you're not, stepping out of your comfort zone some in this industry, you're definitely not learning and getting better. But how do you tell like if it's too big of a step and like you're taking on too
Mm.
many new factors at once and it's just gonna negatively affect the project?
Yeah, it's a great point. I like telling this story a lot, but one of the executive producers that I worked for early on, the most interesting advice he's ever given me was fake it till you make it. And I was very
Hmm.
put off by the statement when he first said this to me. I'm like, what do you mean? What fake it till you make it? Because I've always thought of that as a very negative connotation. And he broke it down for me, and he said, you should be able to know comfortably what you're doing, call it within that like 60%, like 60 to 70%. You should be comfortable that you know it. The other 30 to 40%, you should be able to fake the confidence that you will learn along the way. And that was comforting to me because he said, to the point that you were making, you're never truly growing if you know 100% of the time or 100%
Hmm.
of what you're doing. And that 30 to 40%, um, you should be confident that you'd be able to learn. And a lot of our job is problem solving. As a producer, you are having to like make quick decisions, whether you know 100% of the knowledge that you're hoping to know in any particular scenario. And I
Hmm.
think in problem solving, it's a lot of asking the right questions. It's a lot of, figuring it out because nobody's going to figure it out for you. And I think that faking that confidence is this idea that you trust yourself enough that you understand as a producer, you're going to problem solve this, whether it's you're going to surround yourself with the right people, people that are more maybe competent or more knowledgeable in those particular areas. I always try to surround myself with people that I feel like do in those particular departments. This is kind of like my baseline. Like, if I know as much as you or more than you in any particular, that's a big red flag to me.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like how great I am. It's more to say like, no, you should know way more than I in any particular of these fields. And so if I've done my job right, I should be the dumbest person on set. In some respects. Um, and that's my strategy. I don't know if that always works. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think surrounding yourself with the right people, asking the right questions, and yeah, that you have the full confidence that you are going to problem solve your way there. Um, and so if you're going from like I've done this like music video to then like a $10 million feature film, that's a big leap, right?
Hmm.
And there are principles there that might translate over, but if you've never done something like that it, the advice that I was given or how I've interpreted is that you should be stepping your way towards that. That each
Right.
step should be another 30% you're learning, another 30% you're learning, another 30% you're learning. You're not just making the leap from, call it like zero to 100. And when there are those kind of big gaps, the example that I would give is even I'm in that place right now where I've done now indie level stuff and I've
Hmm.
done commercials, I've done music videos, and we're making a pretty big leap into a mini major type of film that is a potential $20 million plus
Okay.
project. And I've never done that before, but I've the same principles lie in some of the stuff that I've done before, but uh, we're surrounding ourselves with producers that have done it before, to be Sherpas in some ways to what we want to do and help usher us into that place.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, we're constantly surrounding ourselves with different support, whether it's on a department level or producing level or directing level. Uh, to help us, achieve that goal, to not feel like, oh, we're making this like leap blindly and then we're going to set ourselves up for failure.
Yeah.
Uh,
That makes sense how you broke it down and everything. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
yeah,
So I think we'll kind of go ahead and start to transition to talking some about saturation here.
yeah,
My background with saturation, I'd never heard of it. And then within, I think, about a week, I had multiple filmmakers that I followed on social media either share about it on their social or like directly message me about it. So I was like, okay, I'll go, take a look at this. Um, and it's like, okay, this looks cool. And at the time, there was a project that was already in progress that I was producing, and we were using a different setup for all of our budgeting and accounting for it. But I was like, I'll try recreating it in saturation just to see how it works since I have something to kind of test it against. And just in doing that, the program caught a place where we had made an error in our accounting and saved us. It was like 1,500 or 1,800, something like that, dollars that we were able to put then elsewhere into that project. And so that really sold me on it, and I kind of went all in. And then I've used it a couple other times on projects in the past year, including like the biggest one that I had been like a lead producer on. And yeah, I've just it's been fun seeing all the updates coming and all that on it. So,
And which is so cool, by the way, because I didn't know that before scheduling this. I kind of just found out a little bit about that like a few minutes before this interview.
mhm,
So really cool and very grateful that you decided to check us out and that it did help in a very significant way that it um, supported your project and found some of those inefficiencies. And that's why I made it. Honestly, like I was kind of tired of using what existed, and
mhm,
you really were in like two camps. Either you were using one of the like legacy standards,
right.
whether it's like Movie Magic or Hot Budget, which with some of these programs, it's like you need a degree to like even like fully understand because it's so enterprise. Or you're using like something like a spreadsheet, like Excel or Google Sheet, and there's still inefficiencies with that where you could enter the wrong formula or somebody could break a formula or whatever it might be, and it could break apart the
Yep.
entire thing. And it felt so strange that there wasn't something in the middle there. And I found myself using like sometimes three or four different things and also doing sometimes double, if not triple the work. Like we would do like actuals in like a spreadsheet, and then we would have to do the same thing in QuickBooks or in our accounting
Hmm.
program, and just so much manual entry that I always say like I came to LA to be a creative, and I ended up becoming an accountant because you just have to like be a part of like a lot of like manual like processes in terms of finances and invoices and receipts and transactions, and it was just a nightmare. And I was like, there's got to
Right.
be a better way. There's got to be a more efficient way, and there's got to be a way to automate a lot of this. So that's kind of actually it was like right around the Heart of Man when I was making the transition from commercials and music videos, which was like high energy, high paced, and you're just kind of going from one to the other to something like Heart of Man, which had more call it like a longer tail, like
Hmm.
so I had a little bit time in between. So I have a design background, so I just decided designing because I mean, it didn't matter who I talked to. Everybody has their gripes about like what
Yes.
existed, and I was one of them. And so then I was like, you know what, there's got to be a better way. So I just started designing what I thought was the most ideal version of the software. And at the time, I just wanted to make a better collaborative hot budget,
Hmm.
essentially. And that turned into I started showing that design to a couple producers, and then I even made a more official Google form for it
Yep.
where 100 producers gave me feedback on that design and like high level questions that I had. I was surprised that people were even willing to fill it out. It just kind of showed me that yeah, people are pretty unhappy with what they're currently using.
Hmm.
And it gave me the kind of guts and confidence to then take that and do something about it. Um, and had a couple failed starts. It's not easy as much as it looks like, oh, like, hire a developer and show them your
Hmm.
designs and what you want to build and, it'll get done. It's been one of the hardest things that I've had to do, but definitely since we launched this last year has been one of the most rewarding talking with producers like yourself and filmmakers um, where it has drastically changed their workflow. Um, yeah, the comment that I made earlier that I feel like producers are the problem solvers of the film industry. I feel like I've become the problem solver of the problem solver, uh,
Hmm.
where, I'm able to help provide better tools for you to better problem solve.
Yeah, no, and it definitely has. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I just haven't even played around with yet because I haven't had a project that's, had that, need
And the
for.
cool thing is now it's kind of evolved from just budgeting.
Hmm.
We are really trying to help become the all-encompassing financial management system for productions and projects at large. So agnostic of if you're doing a film, if you're doing a commercial, an event, uh, photography, heck, even if you're building a house, the same principles apply. Actually,
Yep.
funny enough, I just budgeted my wedding inside of saturation and did that with my wife, and it was a incredible way to like, use those principles that
Hmm.
we utilize in production, that version of project management that is really core to starting with financials at first. It's one of the few industries that I know that you start with a budget and then you go into the different kind of tasks and
Right.
other types of forms of scheduling and all that, right? Um, and I wanted that to be core to the type of software that I built, that it started out with budgeting and then it got into the various levels of maybe production management or project management that you would have. So uh, yeah, so now in trying to be an all-encompassing financial management tool, we've built out features to do budgeting, transacting, actualizing, and linking to accounting. So that way it's like kind of like a full ecosystem in how to streamline your projects. And especially if you work on multiple projects, how you can better operate your production company or,
Hmm.
be a better producer in many respects.
Definitely. You kind of touched on this some. I'd love to jump back, and like have you share a little bit when you were initially creating it, like what were maybe a couple like specific problems that you were trying to solve with the app?
Yeah. Initially it was we would use kind of multiple different systems, and we weren't a big company, so it's not like we had a full-on accounting team
Hmm.
or anything like that. And so this idea that like we would like manage the project inside of like a spreadsheet or whatever um felt very cumbersome in the sense of like what you were limited to, what you were able to see, what you were able to I mean, to your point, uh it's not always the best for catching accounting errors or anything like that, just because
Hmm.
you're beholden to, at least how we actualized at the time, we were beholden to invoices and receipts that we would get from people.
Right.
And in a high pressured environment that's very like short time and quick, a lot of this industry was based on trust, that when you gave people money, they would give you the money back. When you would get the right amount of receipts, that the invoices would land in the right places. And you're just kind of hoping that it all worked out at the end of the day with
Hmm.
little margin of error. And I never felt like we were fully there.
Okay.
And one of so that was one thing. And I felt like at the time, a lot of other areas in our workflow were starting to become SaaS-based, collaborative. A lot of our team is remote, and we're not always in the right
Hmm.
same place. It's not like what it used to be with a production office. And so we were just, taking Excel files, putting it in a Dropbox, and then like syncing it. And so I would save it, and then, such and such person would open it up on their end, and it was just very cumbersome to collaborate,
Yes.
remotely. And then you would try to do something like that in Google Sheets, and that still had its fair share of like issues because there wasn't like a hot budget or like a easy to use like template that kind of
Hmm.
allowed you to do that. And so I wanted to streamline that, and I found myself on smaller things using hot budget, bigger commercials using Showbiz, feature film using Movie Magic. And then I was like, why am I using three or four different softwares? What should be the same thing? So that was one element of it. That's why we started the budgeting part. The second version of it, why we kind of moved into more financial management, was my production company, when we were working on so many different projects, and where the bottom line of a project really is the bottom line of the company, where
Hmm.
you have to like know how much you're making, what you're like spending, and over the course of even multiple lines, maybe what you're spending like on similar like lines for the year, that could be huge business decisions for you in terms of maybe internalizing some costs, or we just never fully knew where we were as a company
Right.
because the different stages that the different projects were at, and until they wrapped did we know. So we wanted to create a better dashboard and create a better way to like, for companies that are working on multiple projects, how you could more efficiently work on those projects. And one particular instance was, and the thing is, as a company owner, sometimes the more you end up doing, or the more projects you end up doing, the easier it is to be more hands off, or like you're not in the weeds as much as you
Yes.
probably were. And when you were in the weeds, it's maybe a little bit easier in the sense that like you know what it should look like, what the number should be. The more separation you have, you're kind of just trusting that, and you're hoping you create the right systems around a project. And uh I remember we had one project where there was a falling out with the wardrobe um person, and she ended up deciding to just steal the petty cash that like we gave her. And it was like one of those like unfortunate like circumstances where it's like it's meaningful money to us, but not enough to like sue a person, or like, and I think
Right.
she knew that. And it was frustrating, like because a lot of the industry was just like, oh, like if you did something wrong, all it means is that you don't work with that person again. There's not really other like
Hmm.
means of like controlling that situation. And so this idea of financial management and the way that the current system worked inside of production, particularly film production, was that a lot of it was still beholden to on petty cash, or in my case, or my production company's case, sometimes giving out my own credit card to people to use. And
Yeah.
it's kind of comical, like where like I could show you like a sheet that I would make where like it had a picture of my credit card front and back and my ID and the address, and it was like basically like steal my identity. Was like, and that was a very normal way for how we would have line producers or people that might need to make like certain financial like decisions very quickly,
Hmm.
so it was either use cash, use my own card, deal with reimbursements, and they were all like really inefficient, unsafe ways of
Yep.
doing that. And so this is why we decided to create or evolve saturation, I would say, into this way to like be the all-encompassing financial management tool, where you can do a lot of this stuff, where you can do your budgeting, do payments, see how those payments are going against your budget, and their actual like, recorded transactions versus manual entry of
Hmm.
invoices and receipts. Yeah, it was just kind of done with a lot of manual entry. It was a lot of why saturation exists today.
Yeah. No, that sounds cool. Another question I was just interested, since you're one of the creators of it, is like, what's your favorite feature?
I think for me, it's how we've evolved the actualization process. Um, and so for me, it is the use of our expense cards and the ability to then it automatically makes a transaction for you. It's automatically starting to like help you uh, categorize that against your actuals and your budget. And so for me, a lot of it is the automation features of
Hmm.
saturation. That's kind of been my dream, is just this idea that I didn't have to like sit there in a spreadsheet and, continue to like sometimes, this is like days or weeks of work of trying to do that. And I was so done with manual entry. So the fact that we were able to incorporate some of that where you can And we do that in multiple ways where you can link bank accounts, you could use our own, expense platform. We're working on even now like automated and AI features that will start to like, really help streamline some of that information for how you want to see it.
Hmm.
And so it is that. I think it's the automation that is my favorite part of what we've been able to create. And the idea that I could just I've always since I've gotten an iPad have had this dream of like budgeting on my iPad or like just managing on complete like being agnostic of a laptop. And the
Right.
idea of what an iPad did was that it was this freedom to be anywhere and do
Hmm.
because we are constantly moving or having to go to different like locations or and this idea that I could just do it all on my iPad was a dream. And so this is kind of that fulfilling of that dream as well. Or like quickly see something on my phone. Because for anybody that has used one of these legacy softwares knows that if you lose your laptop even like you lose all of your data and all your projects and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that would be another big one for me.
Okay. Yeah, I know I can relate. I just finally upgraded and got a tablet after
Nice.
several just bigger producing projects this year where it was a pain having to bring my laptop along to set so that I can do it all more compact and on the run.
Yeah, it makes a difference sometimes just the mobility of that.
Hmm. Um, what are maybe some teasers you can give about some updates that might be coming soon to the app?
Yeah, I might have even slipped on it a little bit, but the world is moving towards artificial intelligence and how some of this can help supplement, your workflow to not have to spend time on tedious things.
Hmm.
And I really want to lean into that because I really do the sentiment that I gave earlier that how can I think our whole company's goal and our mantra is how do we keep filmmakers, producers, project, owners, how do we keep them creative
Right.
and not bogged down by some of the more tedious things? So it really is helping creative stay creative. That's our whole mantra. And however we can serve that, we want to in the near future and how the world evolves with that, we want to evolve with because that's part of been the issue, right? The reason some of the stuff that we currently use suck is just because they haven't evolved with the times in
Hmm.
terms of what currently exists. And so it's been an amazing challenge to even talk with producers, filmmakers, and how their workflows currently are, and to try to see how we can improve. So we're constantly thinking of that. And you're an active member, so you see it like every month we're doing updates to continue to try to improve. And that this for filmmakers by filmmakers is something that we want to continue to have in our ethos. And we have this even feedback board where people can vote on what we work on next. And so we want it to be as useful to the so I think what I'm most excited about is continuing to evolve the product and part of that is integrations for us. We're not trying to keep you into this ecosystem inside of saturation. We want it to be a part of whatever ecosystem you currently are. So whether you're using Dropbox or Google Drive or HoneyBook, whatever types of
Yeah.
different. If they have integrations, we want to be able to integrate with it so that this can be your all-encompassing um, financial management tool or QuickBooks or your accounting software, whatever it might be. So I would say that's the tease is that hopefully we are saturating in that way to all the different types of ways that you might utilize us.
I just had kind of three wrap-up questions. The first one is obviously you're still producing projects and then you're also developing saturation. So like how do you find that balance of getting projects done but also giving the app the attention it needs?
Yeah, no, it's no easy feat. every production even feels like, like its own job, so to
Hmm.
speak. Um, I have a really great team on both sides. I think that has been a lot of it, but I am also kind of transitioning to move more full time into saturation
Okay.
because I do really care about what we're building, and I think uh, with some more time and effort, I think we can really grow and scale this to be an industry standard in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, definitely not easy at the moment, but yeah, hoping to. And it's still cool though because I'm still in the industry in some
Hmm.
respects, like being able to like talk with producers and filmmakers, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing something so different that
Right.
like I'm in a whole different industry. Like in many ways, I feel like now I'm a little part of every project instead of
Okay.
a big part of one project. So yeah, that's been kind of really cool. But yeah, definitely this year preparing to do this more full time.
Nice. Yeah. No, that'll be cool to make that transition, I bet, and be able to focus more on
Yeah,
saturation. And this question is more producer oriented than saturation based. But
sure.
like, what's one piece of advice you would give someone just getting started as a producer?
Yeah, I think for me, I can only speak from my own experiences. The beauty of producing and filmmaking in general, there's multiple avenues to get to the end goal or result. It's not like being a doctor, you have to, go to med school, and there's a more
Yep.
clear cut way for that to happen. I think for me, there was a bit of a humbling process where even though I felt like I knew a lot or want I felt like I should be at a certain place in life, when I was entering into the film industry, I kind of let go a lot of that and was I just tried to do as much as I could to show up
Hmm.
and um, add as much value to a producer or a film project as I could. And at the time, what that looked like was working for free, just getting my feet wet. And so there was a lot of, I guess, just things that yeah, you wouldn't normally do in like a call it like a job or anything like that. But I
Right.
think I think it drastically helped my career because I think people were then willing to give me a chance with like zero risk,
Hmm.
because it wasn't like that big a deal. So I know that was like really helpful for me is just trying to show up, provide value, be around people or that you aspire to. Like,
Yep.
for me, I had saw a couple producers that it's like, oh, I would love to like, do that. And thankfully it kind of turned into a mentorship where I was able to
Nice.
learn from them by doing with them. Like it was, they would just task me things, as a PA or as a coordinator, and I would learn by proxy. It wasn't like a formal thing where it's like, I'm going to teach you this today. It's, we're going to do this together. Things are going to pop up, and then you're going to learn by proxy or just by doing. You're going to be thrown certain things that you may never have done before, but you're going to
Hmm.
figure out kind of that to the earlier point that we were talking about. So I would say put yourself in those positions as much as possible, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
If you can't find that and you're not like, let's say, near hubs where these kind of industries might be, um, try to put yourself in situations where you can create these opportunities for yourself. Um, whether you're using saturation or not, like create a short film, budget something out, get a couple friends together, do it for like a couple $100, whatever it might be. Like try to remove barriers of entry. A lot of it is just doing, and
Hmm.
we can get so complacent in something's too big or daunting, and then you just don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
And find ways to like yeah remove those barriers and just do. I mean, a lot of our short films was that. Like it's not like you'll never have enough money. You'll never have enough time. You'll never have enough resource. So learning how to do with what you have, I think, is a really important part of the process. And I think so many people have made ways, and even in the content space based on that idea, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I would say that find ways to get rid of the excuse and continue to ask yourself the why not? Why can't I do this? Why, and problem solve yourself uh to some of those. And some of that is talking it out, some of that is finding partners, accountability teams. That's the beauty of filmmaking, right? Like when there's a team, you kind of feel more motivated or more accountable to do something instead if it was
Yes.
just you alone in your room, you're not going to, push yourself in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And having that accountability or that deadline that
Yeah, deadline, yeah, is a
people
great one too.
are depending on you to hit.
Yeah.
And so then hopefully if I've done my job on this episode, well, people are super excited about saturation and either want to at least go find out more about it or give it a try. So where can they go to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure by when this episode releases, there'll be a link below or somewhere,
Mhm.
click on that link. Um, and the beauty of that is when you get there, you're able to you create a free account and do a whole project in there for free. So there's really no uh, cost barrier there. And we have a ton of templates that's easy for you to get started, whether you're doing a short film, a commercial, or whatever. Start with a template, and um, there's some like really great tutorials and stuff like that on YouTube as well. But yeah, saturation.io is our platform. And yeah, use the link that Micah has to get started.
And yeah, on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's episode. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on today.
Yeah, thank you. My honor. It was a great chat.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Want to learn more about saturation or give it a try? Then click the link below in our episode description or go to saturation.io/ the producer podcast. Don't forget to also pick up your copy of the new book by show host Micah Versman, The Producer's Life, A Guide to Practical Film Producing, on sale now. Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.